Well, good evening. We're here to launch our initial Bitter Men on Sports. And with me tonight, we have Chris Slow Trot Fletcher. You put that any way you want. Gary Cujo Kinn, probably the most bitter of our, would you not say?
I always thought I was a bitter man until I met Gary. And then
You're like friggin' Mr. Rogers.
Oh, it's funny you should mention Mr. Rogers because there will be a Mr. Rogers mention in this show tonight.
You can't have an initial show without a Mr. Rogers.
What a beautiful unrehearsed segue.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'm Dave, the Onion King Finoli. How are you doing tonight, gentlemen?
How are you doing, Onion King?
Oh, I'm going to point out our different man caves here. Fletcher with the classic programs behind him.
My favorite is from, this is like they're doing the weather, isn't it?
Yeah.
World Series.
You got to get us some green up there, my friend.
Get rehearsing here, Fletch. We got to have you do this now.
You got to get the green, and you look like you have the massive man cave down there, Gary.
It's pretty chaotic, but I'm comfortable here.
All right, very good. Well, I think we can all agree first that Josh Harrison cannot field at second base. As we start this, he is proving again to all of us he cannot field, cannot throw out Melky Cabrera, who I believe you beat in the 40-yard dash, Fletcher.
I walked and I ran backwards, and I still beat him.
But this is not a memory that I think we're going to take with us, the Josh Harrison botched ground ball to second.
Yeah.
We will this Sunday. I think we can all agree this was one of those great memories, one of those, I don't want to call them once in a lifetime because obviously it's not once in a lifetime, but they're rare. I mean, it's the reason we kind of watch sports in hopes of getting memories such as these. Tiger, 4 or 5 years ago, his life falling apart. Certainly every little secret he kept came out in spades after his little car accident. And then you go to the bad back 2 years ago, he tells Jack Nicklaus his playing days are over. He can hardly walk. This was not anything you would expect. Has the back surgery, still would not expect this. I mean, the man was 21 years old in 1997 when he had his first magic moment. He wins the Masters with a record-setting 18 under. Second place is Tom Kite at 6 under. To me, that was the first of Tiger's moments such as this. 2000, Pebble Beach is sent up to be a bear that year. I mean, nobody in their right mind should be under par. He's 12 under par. Second place is Jimenez and Els at 3 over. 15-stroke difference in the U.S. Open. I mean, these moments don't have to be close classic games. They can be individual performances that are just beyond comparison. But this one, I mean, this man was nowhere near a professional golfer just a couple of years ago, ranked 1,200 in the world, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, to get to this point was just a mind-boggling moment. It was a moment we're all going to remember, a moment everybody in this audience is going to remember. And, those are the reason we watch sports. Those are the things we talk about. I mean, between the three of us, we watch sports every day of our lives. There's not a day, I was talking about this with Gary, there's not a day we go by where we don't read about sports, where we don't have a magazine, a book, something on TV. And there's so few of those days that we have like that. To me, I come up with a few things, and then I'll kind of throw it to you guys. Buster Douglas, 1990. Gary, we Fletcher, Pasquale, I don't know if you remember him from Duquesne, occasionally Gary Degnan, we'd all get together for the big heavyweight fights, the big fights in general. And this was going to be such a rout that we decided, you know what, it's not worth it. It's going to be quick. It's not worth the drive. So I'm sitting in my bedroom on like a 7-inch black and white TV watching this thing. And when they pull the condom out to put over Mike Tyson's eye midway in the fight, just obviously their handlers didn't expect anything to happen. I mean, Buck Douglas, 42-1. No way he should be in a ring and with this man, much less beating him. Knocks him out in the 10th round. To me, that is my all-time boxing, know where I was kind of moment.
Yep.
Although a bad fight when Spinks lost to Ali, the thing I remember about that is Howard Cosell reciting Bob Dylan's Forever Young towards the end of that fight. And that, to me, was just such a goosebump moment. One of the sad things about my following sports is I didn't appreciate Ali enough in his day. And my appreciation of what he's accomplished comes in a retrospective moment. Not unlike that savagely bad swing Francisco Cervelli just took to strike out. But, it's those moments you really remember. For me, I was at the Immaculate Reception. This was a moment for a whole altogether different reason. You're looking at your program now, aren't you, Fletch? There it is. There it is. There's our graphic, okay? We just had our first graphic.
It's beautiful.
Now, I was blessed with a great father. Loved him to death.
Hef was the man.
He was. He had his Hef robe there. His last 5 years, he always had a robe on. He looked like Hef. He lived to almost 101, and the first thing I found on his dresser was a book, How to Live to 100. So he obviously read that well.
He followed directions.
But anyways, the one thing was bad about that, he was a sore loser. The other thing was he hated traffic. So when Kenny Stabler, that bastard Kenny Stabler, scores that touchdown to put him up 7-6, my dad, who had known nothing but bad Steeler moments for the 41 years before, as the Steelers were the joke of the NFL for almost his entire life at that point, turns to us and says, let's get the hell out of here. At least we'll beat the traffic. So we're at Gate C of Three River Stadium when I get my goosebump moment. But to me, the goosebump moment was, Roy Jarella must have kicked a field goal as the crowd starts roaring and we start walking down. It wasn't until we got to the car that we realized just the moment we missed. So goosebumps, yeah. Goosebumps today for that moment, sure. But it's a bittersweet moment. And what would that make my father, Fletch? Busher of the Week. My father
Our
was
second graphic.
There you go. He was Busher of the Week. Oh, man. In memoriam, of course. But, oh, God. How many times do you remember Jordy Mercer and Josh Harrison having an error in the same inning here?
This is really the sight of Josh Bell coming around third base. That's a lot of huffing going on right there.
That's a lot of huffing, my friend. A lot of huffing. This is a magical night for us as we tell these stories. But that to me was a bittersweet memory. I laugh about it. I chuckled about it with them till the day he died. We always had a good laugh about that. But another great moment was in 1997, the freak year. The team as a whole made less than Albert Bell did in a year. $9 million. Albert Bell, as you recall, got paid that year. The Pirate payroll was less than that. And somehow they stayed in the pennant race till the last week of the year.
Mm-hmm.
In that was a freakish, they called it the freak show. It was a freakish no-hitter. 44,119 people were at Three River Stadium. It was the first sellout, non-opening day sellout crowd at Three River Stadium since 1977. 20 years. Cordova is just magical that night against Houston. But, of course, with the pitch count, as they were just starting to come into being, they bring in Rincon for the 10th. He sets Houston down. Mark Smith, a journeyman guy with some power, hits a 3-run homer in the bottom of the 10th to win it. Just an exciting thing. But something tells me, Fletcher, as great as Mr. Rogers was, he might not have been your favorite person that night.
He was not. We worked in the same building. He worked his office was down the hall from mine, and he came into my office and he said, "Could you do me a favor? Could you go to this charity event for me this weekend?" And I said, "Well, Fred, I've got tickets to the Pirate game." And he said, "If you could really do this for me, I would appreciate it." So I traded in my Pirate tickets, and I'm at this event in Nevillewood. The valet comes and gets the car. My car radio is on, and I hear that it's a no-hitter going into the 10th inning. And I just looked at my wife and I said, "You've got to be blanking kidding me." So we're driving, have the car radio on. We honestly were down by Three Rivers Stadium when the ball went out. So that was about as close as I got to it. But still, even in the car, I thought Lanny for Terry was going to explode and come through get all over my car seats. It was going to be really ugly. But it was, I wish I could have seen it. I immediately went and watched the recap. But yeah, an incredible, incredible game. And, you mentioned these Goosebump moments. I guess I would sort of characterize mine in a couple of different categories. I have them under home runs, death, and disaster. I think that's really what mine are made of.
Well, we needed a disaster moment in the show, so please.
The home runs, the Kirk Gibson home run in the World Series, just Vin Scully's call alone was worth the drama. It was amazing. And seeing him pumping his fist like this as he's hobbling around the bases, his only bat during that entire World Series. You could almost make an argument for a guy winning the World Series MVP with one at bat, because that just turned that whole thing around. Yeah. Cal Ripken, two memorable homers. One during the game when he passed Gehrig for the most consecutive games played, and then in his final All-Star game, he cracks one. I mean, there was some serious drama on that. The Bonds walk-off was at 90 with the extended arms like this. I guess it was against the Cardinals, wasn't it?
Was that the one that came way back?
Yep. And he ended the walk-off like that. And then my final one was the Rob Makoviak, your favorite Pirate, Gary, who hit 2 home runs and a doubleheader on the day his son was born, one being a walk-off to win it.
There's a name for the past. Makoviak, yeah. I remember him.
Yeah. So now we have we now go to our death part of the thing.
Do we have a graphic for that?
There is no. Is that good? Tiger Woods winning the Open after his father passed. Yeah, that was just an amazing moment where the emotion just comes out of the normally. I mean, he gets fired up, but you never see him like that. He just crumpled into his caddy's arms. It was really an amazing moment. And then the Brett Favre game that he played after his father passed, when he had 4 touchdowns and 300 yards in the first half against the Raiders. It seemed like he couldn't miss anything. And then the disaster games, New Orleans, the Monday night game, the first one back in the Superdome.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The place is going nuts. Joe Horn leads the team out onto the field. I remember that. And then there's a block punt. And the ESPN people, to their credit, their broadcasters didn't say a word. They just let the crowd noise and everything convey the story. And that, to me, was just an amazing moment.
Yeah.
And then the other one for me is 9/11. The first Pirate game after that was against the Mets.
Yeah.
And they gave out these little miniature flags. And my son was a preschooler, was probably about 4 or 5 years old at the time. And I remember watching him on the Jumbotron holding the flag. And I had relatives in Atlanta who said that they saw it on CNN. They saw him with his little flag like that.
Oh, wow.
That was my Goosebump moments. Gary, I know you've got tons of them because you are Mr. Goosebump.
Yes, I am. Not quite as bitter as I seem. More emotions than I see.
Your high-tech camera there, I can see you have some right now, Gary.
I have goosebumps just from sharing this with you guys.
All right.
Don't make me cry, Gary.
I broke them up into a little bit different. It's interesting how we all look at this differently. I broke them up into live, and then I broke them up into ones that I had seen. And gentlemen, I kind of focused on the three sports that I'm the most passionate about. I mean, I do think, not being the golf expert or historian you are, Fletch, or maybe even you are, Dave, all I know is all Woods has been through. This past weekend's clearly up there if you're a golf fan in our lifetime. It's got to be in there. I mean, nobody expected this. And I saw what somebody bet that he would win. It was 96-1 or something. Did you see that in Vegas?
Yeah,
like 40,000. He won $1 million.
He bet $80,000 and he won almost 1.8 million.
Isn't that amazing?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we should know a little more than we do, you know, maybe to take those kind of things now since it's become so easy to bet on these things. But, you know, I'm not a big golf guy, but that one's clearly got to be up there. Just hearing about it, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was half asleep, falling asleep on Sunday afternoon and dreaming. But I broke it up into things that I've been lucky enough to go to live and some things that I think back when I was a kid. You know, Dave, you and I chat about, well, what kind of made you feel? You were talking about the Fisk home run in the 75 World Series. Like, this is something that is going to solidify me to this for the rest of my life.
I had the same feeling, Gare.
Right. And I think about a couple things really early, watching it with my dad, my brother, and then I think about, just to touch on a few things that I kind of was lucky enough to be at live. You know, I broke it down. I think baseball for me, you know, I turned 9 years of age in 1970. And every single World Series, 1970, 1971, 1972, and 1973 in particular, were riveting in their own right. I mean, Brooks Robinson stole 1970. I remember as a kid watching the 7 or 8 great plays he made, and everybody thought the Big Red Machine would roll through them despite Baltimore's pitching. He stole that series himself. 1971's obviously, you know, we're all close to that one. Still maybe in some ways one of the best top 5 World Series ever. Clemente was just unbelievable in that. That series, similar to 79, had a lot of shifting time. Just a great series from top to bottom. 72, the Reds return. People calling them the best team in baseball, and they certainly were on the way to that even at that stage. Oakland, nobody really knew much about Oakland at that point because we didn't get the games back then. You only saw Oakland a couple times on national TV, but they got into that series, and it was amazing how good they were. Everybody knew about Vida Blue in 1971, but they were far more than him. And then in 73, they return. Now they're expected to win, and the upstart Mets, who I think finished 83-79, upset the Reds in the playoff. Every one of those World Series riveted me. There's no singular moment in it. It was just those series as a block themselves. And, you know, we've talked about baseball in the past. We've done our podcasts. Despite all the games problems right now, I'm married to it. You know, I mean, I'll support it. I'm married to it. And those 4 World Series for me changed, you know, my view of the thing. Also going to go way back to hockey. 1971, they changed the playoff system. Original 6, which my father explained to me, were pretty bitter about the fact that the Blues were going to the championship all the time because they were trying to get those 6 expansion teams into the playoffs and get the business going, and they changed it back. So we have 2 original 6 teams meet. 11 Hall of Famers on those teams, 4 on Chicago, 7 on the Canadiens. 2 sensational teams. Ken Dryden plays 6 games coming out of law school. He becomes the MVP of the playoffs. The series goes back and forth. You know, the Hawks were the best team in hockey. They hold serve in the first 2 games. The Canadiens go up to the Forum. The place is rocking. That was the biggest rocking building in those days. They win 2 games. Teams trade wins again. In the 7th game, it's a back-and-forth game, and both Esposito and Dryden, 2 Hall of Fame goalies, are standing on their head. I remember I was a little kid, but my father and I were just riveted. We didn't say anything watching those games on TV. And for some reason at that point in time, I think you got the games on NBC during that series. But, you know, that kind of hooked me on hockey for good. And ever since then, I've followed the game religiously ever since. Boxing, Dave, you talk about. Clearly the most signature moment for anybody, casual boxing fan or anybody else, is the Douglas Tyson victory. But I go back to a fight in June of 1978. Again, Cosell. Guys talked about Ali. We didn't realize how far Ali was gone at that time. We didn't realize Foreman didn't really care anymore. Ken Norton was still a viable threat. In today's era, Ken Norton would have cleaned up the field probably, even in some of the 90s. He takes on Larry Holmes, an unknown commodity at that time. But I had been lucky enough to see Larry Holmes live in 1974 on his way up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He was big and long, and he had a tremendous jab. He and Ken Norton put on one of the best heavyweight fights you'll ever see. So if anybody who's watching this or listening to this, you should tune it in. ABC, June the 9th, 1976. Norton was getting dominated in the first 5 or 6 rounds. He goes to his corner and the audio picks up, now it's my turn. The next 5 or 6 rounds, he battered Holmes all over the place, but they both stood there toe-to-toe and traded almost like a movie, but it was real. Holmes takes the lead again in the 12th and the 13th. Norton rallies in the 14th. And in the 15th, they traded for 3 solid minutes. Cosell even was speechless. And Holmes got a narrow decision to win it. And it kind of put Larry Holmes on the map. So those 3 things to me, TV-wise, kind of solidified me. Now I'm just going to touch Dave quickly on a couple things I was lucky enough to go to live. I got to see Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals in 2010, or Game 6 rather, of the Stanley Cup Finals here when the Chicago Blackhawks came in. As much as I've watched hockey in my life, I had never been anywhere near a Stanley Cup Final. I'll tell you, when you're sitting there and one team takes the lead late, it's hard to describe the feeling of that. You start thinking about all the history they've been playing for this thing since 1918, 19 in the NHL, and even before that in hockey history. And the Hawks took the lead, and Scott Hartnell got a goal with 4 minutes to go, and the place went absolutely crazy. The game went into overtime, and Patrick Kane came down right in front of us. Although he's a right wing, he came down a left wing side, and he slipped the puck under Michael Lawton's pads. Nobody knew it. One of the strangest endings in NHL history. And then the place, even though the Blackhawks won, the place erupted, because it's hard to describe the feeling of being at something like that with that much history when you know that it could happen and it's gonna right in front of you. And it did. I got to see Josh Beckett throw a no-hitter here in Philadelphia. It certainly wasn't the most dominant no-hitter ever. He gave up 3 hits gave up no hits and he walked 3. And about the 5th inning, he didn't look that dominant. But similar situation, if you've ever gone to a no-hitter live and you start getting into the 7th, the 8th inning, you can feel the goosebumps. You can feel the apple in your throat a little bit too, because you know something's happening here that you rarely get to see. And there wasn't a huge crowd there that day, probably about 30,000 over Memorial Day weekend. But when Beckett got that no-hitter, it's kind of an odd reaction. It's kind of quiet. And then there was an ovation, and it was pretty amazing ovation for a while, because you realize how almost impossible it is to do that when you're a no-hitter live. And then one last fight I'm going to mention, again, for people who like boxing or combat sports. Arturo Gatti, Ivan Robinson, Atlantic City Convention Hall, August the 22nd, 1998. Arturo Gatti was HBO's favorite child. He was in fights that were like movie fights, but it was real. Ivan Robinson was a decorated amateur out of Philadelphia, and he was an alternate on the Olympic team. These guys knew each other under the main events promotion banner. The fight was kind of a fill in the time, it seemed. Gatti was kind of on the downside. He wasn't really taking care of himself as well as he should to maintain the weight in between fights. He lost Angel Man Freddy 9 months earlier pretty decisively. He gets back in there in August, and he gets in there with Robinson. I was lucky enough to get there early because I'm coming in. I said, good luck, Ivan. He said, I'm in the best shape of my life, and I'm ready to go, so pay attention. And sure as hell, he was right. Those guys went at each other hammer and tong for all 10 rounds and all 30 minutes. It was fantastic. It's not the greatest fight in history, but I tell you, all 3,500 people got up and gave them a standing ovation after the 10 rounds were over. With 50 seconds to go, Gatti was a big puncher. He clicked Robinson with a hook on the chin on the ropes, and Robinson had to hang on and survive, and he did, and he was fighting back at the bell. If you haven't been to a high-level prize fight like that, hope you get the chance one day if you're a sports fan, because there's really nothing that you can describe like that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Gare, you certainly have a great background, a great boxing historian. You went to something a little different this week. You went to an MMA event that you were telling me about. Why don't you tell us a little about that and a little about what went on in combat sports this last week?
I think last week was kind of quiet, although ironically, the MMA card last week had 2 tremendous fights for that sport. Now, I can't say I'm learning that sport. I probably have been paying attention to it because of some younger friends that I have, and I just, I like combat sports and I like the business of it. But I did go to an MMA bout live in Philadelphia. I will say that compared to professional boxing, other than events in Las Vegas, it was far better run. It was very well managed.
Really? That's interesting.
And the card was very competitive. 13 fights on the card for the money, and the prices were cheaper than professional boxing. So I was impressed by what Dana White is doing.
You said it was a great crowd too, correct?
It was an excellent card, very competitive in the main event, although it didn't last long, was incredibly exciting for the 3 minutes. Last week, there were 2 fights in MMA that were excellent ones. Dustin Poirier has been a good fighter his whole career. He never really got a title shot because of some injuries. He got one. He fought a guy by the name of Max Holloway out of Hawaii, who's an all-time great probably, and Poirier won. And it's good to see a guy like that who's waited for 10 years for his chance to win. And then the second fight, a young guy by the name of Israel Adesanya, reminds me of John Jones, if anybody follows MMA, although Adesanya is much younger. He beat a good veteran by the name of Kelvin Gastelum, also in a sensational bout at the other co-main event on the card. This week coming up, I'll talk about in our predictions, Dave. There are 2 fights that people should pay attention to this weekend.
Was there a big fight on ESPN on Friday that I saw?
Not a big one. Vasily Lomachenko might be the best pound-per-pound fighter. It was a stay-busy fight. Anthony Kroll out of Britain is a good fighter, Dave. Everybody knew it would be a wipeout, and it was. Lomachenko knocked him out in the 4th round.
Okay.
The fight that's the big one is one coming up when we talk about our predictions. Terrence Crawford is fighting Amir Khan this weekend. That is potentially very, very good fight, and I'll give a prediction on that.
Outstanding. Now, we talk wacky for the week. I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden, Magic Johnson pops on my TV, talking about one of your favorite teams, Fletch. What happened in that situation?
Well, Davey quit, and it was really a sad thing because I'm a big Magic fan.
Yeah,
and I've been a Laker fan since I've been a kid. And it's really hard to see the franchise where it is right now. And I think we all agree that there are certain teams that a league is better when they're competitive, whether it's the Yankees in baseball, whether it's the Packers in football, or, the Lakers, the Celtics, to me, in basketball. They're the ones that, when they're good, and the Knicks, throw the Knicks in there as well, that the league is better.
Agreed.
And the Lakers, think about this, guys. From 1949 to 2013, this team only missed the playoffs 5 times.
Wow.
Let that sink in for a second when you have this current streak right now of 6 years that they've not been in. And, I felt really good about Magic Johnson when he came in. I thought this would be a guy who would help recruit stars to come there. I thought he would be a great eye for talent. He was obviously a very astute businessman. He's done very well outside of basketball. And, even this year with LeBron James coming in, I think we were all pretty excited about that. We thought that there was something there, but it was never right. When the Lakers were good, they've always had at least 2 all-stars on that team, whether it's Kareem and Magic or Kobe and Shaq. Well, this time they went basically with LeBron and role players. Magic didn't really handle the recruiting of players, which I thought would be a strength. He didn't sign Paul George. He didn't get DeMarcus Cousins at a discount, which he could have. And it just all fell apart. And just to see him leave like that, it was really disheartening for me. I mean, you look back at how well that team was run for many years. And, it would have been great to have a different former Laker in charge still, and that's Jerry West. And Jerry West put together a hell of a franchise, working very closely with Mitch Kupchak. But Magic years, I think we're all going to look back as a very big disappointment. And, the thing that he said that really bothered me is that he saw the Lakers sort of as his sister, and he would always be there for her. And, he didn't even tell the owner face-to-face that he was leaving. Didn't tell the Buss family that he was leaving. He just left.
Seemed a little gutless.
Very gutless. And for Magic, that just really bothered me. And this sign, fellows, I made for Magic.
Let's give it to him. Let's take that off the hook.
I'm taking it off a Hef.
Okay. Well, what do you think what do you think the future is looking like here? Is it starting from scratch? LeBron came across to me this year as just a guy who didn't give a damn, especially towards the second half. I was as a Cavalier fan, I never thought I'd see that.
I think LeBron's one of those players, sort of like Kobe, sort of like Michael Jordan. He's not easy to play with.
Yeah.
both from the expectation, and those are the types of guys who see things that other people on the court don't see.
Yeah.
So I think there's a high frustration level with that.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an interesting off season. I don't know what they're going to do, but you really have excuse me, you have it to the part now where the Clippers are the basketball franchise in town.
Yeah.
And as a former Clippers season ticket holder, I never thought I would see that.
Right, absolutely. And
I have one thought here, Dave, if you want.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I have one thought if you guys want.
Oh, please.
So I think, Fletch, I'm not as close to this. I always liked the Lakers too, and I totally agree. That franchise, from the uniforms to the building to the city, it's got to be good, or the league isn't as good as it could be. But the part that it seemed to me, not maybe following this guys as closely as you guys do, but both James and Johnson, their behavior and their attitude, and Johnson's surprising resignation when he says that he loves Jeannie Buss here. I just wonder if there's something to do with the youth in the league. These guys are not used to dealing with somebody whose father's carping all the time about how he's the greatest player and he can't shoot the ball. Yeah. And you got another guy that shows up late for the game all the time. Are they just saying, I'm fed up with this? This isn't babysitting. It's professional basketball. But I'm surprised Johnson would bolt like that. I would have thought he would have said, I need more control, and I'm going to get it, and we're going to change this. But to just bolt because he wants to do more charity work and stuff, it just seemed kind of lame.
Yeah.
Well, see, to me, it seemed like here's a guy who basically screwed up a situation where he's gotten the greatest player on the planet and did nothing with it, and he's not used to losing. And it almost came through as, I'm just going to quit.
Right.
Rather than sit there and try to figure out where I went wrong.
Well, here's a guy who's always been competitive with Larry Bird. Yeah. And Larry Bird proved to be the better front office person.
By far.
Yep.
It's not always about getting the best talent. It's about the talent meshing as a team. And as you said, Gary, you get a kid like Ball coming in whose father's yapping left him. It was a lot like the Steelers. Where you had a lot of talent, but it wasn't focused on winning all the time.
The lucky person in all of this is Luke Walton, because he's out of there.
He's out of there and on his way to Sacramento, I hear.
Sacramento, right. So I think that, because I always thought Luke was a good choice. He was a very smart basketball player.
Yep.
He was a Laker, for God's sake. It's always good to have one of your own lead the team.
Yeah. But, and I think even more so than Jordan and Kobe, this guy is tough to coach. This guy is tough on coaches.
Right.
I think sometimes he tends to push a little too hard towards things that aren't best for the franchise. I'm not saying he did it here, but in Cleveland, he kind of held them under the fire to make this change and that change, and they weren't the good changes. Kind of, I don't want to say forced Kyrie out of there, but he didn't even want to stay. And Kyrie is a great talent. I think right now I'm not sure Jeannie Buss is ever going to be in the shadow of her father, much less her father in building a team.
Doesn't appear that way.
Hopefully they put somebody in charge, because you're right. I've never been a Laker fan, but it's good to have them winning. It's good to have the Celtics winning. It's good when they both face off against each other in the playoffs. But it was certainly disappointing there. And that'll bring me to my segment. I'm going to make the claim. Last night, what you saw was a culmination of the worst Penguin playoff loss in my lifetime. And since my lifetime and our lifetime encompasses the entire lifetime of that franchise, it is the worst, only challenged by that 2013 loss against Boston in the semifinal.
Right. Crosby didn't score then either. Right. We're up 4-0. Yep.
They were in the conference final at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying the Islanders aren't good. The Islanders are good. Trotz has made himself. You got to give him props. Penguin fans, we're not The Capitals are not a team we like to root for, but this guy did a hell of a job last year. This guy did a remarkable job with these Islanders. But that being said, you had the better offensive talent. You had the better team. You had the more experienced team. There was no reason you score 6 goals in 4 games. It was a listless performance. Well, Murray did not play well. I'm getting sick and tired of everybody trying to lay this entire thing on him. That's all I hear all day. To me, that's a lazy sports fan who's just looking at a quarterback, at a pitcher, or a goaltender as to why a team loses.
Right.
To me, no, he didn't play his best in this series, but he was the reason they ended up where they were. He had a tremendous second half of the year. He finished above Fleury in save percentage, which if you saw where he was at the end of December, that's remarkable. That blew my mind that he ended up with that good a save percentage. No, he didn't play his best, but they scored 6 goals in 4 games. 6 goals in 4 games. This talented offensive team. And I don't care how fast, I don't care how strong New York was. There is no excuse for that. They made a mention today on 93.7 The Fan about that when a team has a defensive philosophy like the Penguins, the goaltender has to be the guy that comes up with the big saves. No. When you're a team like that, you have to be the team that scores 4 or 5 goals a game. That's how you win those games. Tom Barrasso was a Hall of Fame talent who had goals against in the high 3s because that's what that kind of system needs. It needs scorers that are going to score you 5-6 goals a game, so you can give up the 2 or 3 goals. But I mean, especially looking at the overtime goal in Game 1, absolutely the worst defensive play I have seen in my life. This guy is playing with the puck in front of Murray. Nobody takes him off the puck. He has a guy wide open next to Murray. This is overtime. You've just hustled to tie the game, and that to me, I don't give them certainly a pass at that. And these people that are saying, well, they won 2 cups, this was a better team. When you are the better team, you don't get a pass. Well, I won 2 cups, so I can basically come out here listless. So this is just irritated me beyond anything I've seen with this team because they were the better team. They could have lost to the Islanders, that's fine, but not in a sweep. Not scoring 6 goals in 4 games. Thoughts on this, Jim?
Well, I can give some credit to Gary because Gary all year has been talking about this is a team that needed to be bigger. And I think that really played out in this series. Their gap control was horrible. They couldn't, and they also, this is against that team, you needed to dump and run, and you needed to just be patient, and you were going to try and, they had good chances. Their goaltender stole a couple of games. Ours did not. And you're right, Dave. I think that Murray gets a lot of grief on this series, and the problem was he gave up a couple bad goals. Yeah. And when you're not scoring any goals, that's huge.
Yes, exactly.
I think that it's going to be interesting in the offseason. I didn't see much from Malkin. I didn't see much from Letang. There's some pretty pricey talent there. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they retool. What do you think they're going to do, Gary?
Well, I think, I think that the things that I have said a while, and a lot of people have said, really came home to roost in this series. They just don't have enough around Crosby. I think beyond the blaming Murray, as you say, Dave, is easy, lazy to do. Letang was never right after he was hurt that dust up in Philadelphia in the outdoor game. He gambled 3 or 4 times in play. So did Schultz. That created 2-on-1s, and I don't care who it is in the NHL. You do that, the goalie's going to get beat pretty high percentage of those kind of chances.
Right.
2-on-1s. No, they got nothing out of guys, anybody other than Crosby on the offensive end. Crosby was basically doing it himself. He'd go into the corner, get the puck, and he'd drive to the net with one hand on the stick. We saw nothing from Rust. Honestly, Gensel couldn't deal with those bigger Islander forwards or defensemen at all. So
he looked helpless.
I just feel if you look at the teams that are winning now in the NHL, when the Penguins had Hagelin, and these guys were a little bit younger, which means a lot in that league, they outran everybody.
Yep.
Toronto right now is doing that to Boston. Whether they can do it over 7 games remains to be seen. But if you look at the teams that are winning these series, they are big, physical, grinding teams that clog up the neutral zone. Columbus, Islanders, even the Capitals, out west, Las Vegas. They got some speed spruced in, but they got big wingers and big defensemen. The Penguins do not have that. But I really think beyond just the blame here of Murray, they just really didn't know. And Sullivan, there's got to be some call on Sullivan here and the coaching staff. They never figured out how to use it. I think, Dave, you and I talked about this.
Yeah.
Trying to skate through the Islanders in a neutral zone with those big wingers, you're not going to do it. Create a foot race, throw it in the corner, get the cycle going, and you're going to beat them that way. You're going to wear them down by your speed and skill. They never figured out how to do that in 4 games.
Right.
I understand the frustration. That goes back to the coaching staff a little bit. It almost reminded me a little bit of when Bilesma was there, and they had that horrible series against Philadelphia in 12, and then the following year they did get to the finals, but Boston did basically the same thing.
Yep.
You know, you know this coming in. These guys know these personnel in this league left and right. And I mean, I love Sullivan, and I'm sorry not ready to say, you know, it's his fault. It's all of them. Even Crosby didn't play particularly well defensively in this series. But the bottom line is they never figured out how to deal with it. And if you're not going to figure out how to deal with it, you don't got size to grind teams down. You're going to go out pretty quick. I hate to say it.
Absolutely. Now, quickly, let's talk about a stunner. I mean, as bad as we feel here, in Tampa Bay, you won 62 games, a league record, and you're playing a team that caught a little fire towards the end of the year. But I mean, let's face it, a week or two before that, they were out of the playoff run. So there is no reason to think Columbus was going to beat Tampa, much less dominate them. I mean, come out with a 3-0 lead in the first period, the Lightning, or I think it was the first period.
It was.
But it was fairly quick in the game, and then all of a sudden you blow that lead and you're never really in the series after that. How historic is this?
Well, it's sort of like that Mariners team that went out that had the record for most wins in a season. I mean, it is a stunner, but you know, again, the playoffs are all about who's hot and what the matchup is. And that was not a good matchup for them. That was a gritty, grinding team that took them out of their game. And you're right, Dave. I think emotionally, when they gave up that 3-0 lead, something clicked, and it just got Columbus fired up. You know, they always talk about it's never a series until somebody wins on somebody else's ice. When you lose that first game and you start getting behind in that second game, I think the medical term is sphincteritis. It starts to contract a little bit, and they didn't have the ability to release. Let's just say that.
Should there be a telethon for sphincteritis?
Oh yes, maybe we can bring Jerry Lewis back and he can sing.
Well, we're going to get into that. Going to get into that a little more in our next round here, but let me just go through this real quick before we move on to that. 2001 Mariners, 116-46, did not win.
Dead.
League championship. Dead. 1906 Cubs, 116-36. Dead.
Yeah.
2015-16 Warriors, my greatest year as a basketball fan. Warriors, 73-9. Dead.
Win, right.
2018-19 Lightning, 62-16. Dead. 1995-96 Red Wings, 62-13.
Dead.
Yeah.
Patriots, 2007, 16-0. Dead. Double dead. I mean, that to me just volumes about what it takes to get to that point and how much it takes out of you going to the playoffs when all of a sudden you've won 116 games and everything's even now. 0-0.
Well, here's the other thing too, guys.
That's Cooper. Cooper made that point. That's what Cooper's kind of saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if I buy it fully, but I guess what are you going to say? But that's what Cooper's saying. But I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
And don't forget, guys, that the Stanley Cup's the hardest championship to win, without question. By far.
Yeah, by far. I mean, do you rate this as the greatest hockey upset you've seen, Gare?
Yeah, I'd certainly got to be in there. I'd have to think about its ranking. I mean, I think a couple key things, though, that the non-hardcore hockey followers don't really focus on. Victor Hedman plays 28 minutes a night. He wasn't right in this series. He was injured down the stretch. He played the first 2 games, didn't play a lot of minutes. He was beaten when he was out there, and he missed the last 2 games. That's like losing Chris Letang or guys like that. Big, big factor. Nobody talks about checking lines that are punishing. The Islanders had it.
Mm-hmm.
He had Clutterbuck out there, and he had Cizikas out there, and he had Martin out there against Crosby. That grinds you down 7 games over 14 days. Dubinsky, Boone Jenner, and whoever was playing with them was a bunch of different guys. They didn't give Stamkos and those guys any room at all in the series. And I think the last thing, I hate to say it, and we're not in the locker room, but Tampa Bay has a history of getting close and not finishing. 2 years ago against the Penguins, they take a 3-2 lead. Fleury comes in, they wallop Fleury. Looks like the series is over. Penguins win. Last year they go up 3-2 on the Capitals. Looks like the series is over. Caps go down there and win twice. Shut them out in both games.
Mm-hmm.
This year they win 62. Here we go against Columbus, which is a better team than people realize. A heavy grinding team, like they say. A good matchup, as you say, Fletch. They go out in the first round. You got to start to question in that locker room the leadership. Kucherov showed it again. That hurt them bad with him taking that hit to the head of whoever, Savard or whoever it was, and then missing game 3. Can't do stuff like that in the postseason, particularly when you're down 2-0. So there's something missing there that's got to be addressed if I'm in the Tampa front office. But Dave, clearly in the top 5 in my almost 50 years of watching hockey.
Hey, Gary, one quick thing, Gary. Have you ever seen a team put a 4th line out to start a game, an energy line like that to go out after another team's first line? I can't recall seeing that.
It doesn't happen so much in modern hockey, Fletch, but it used to happen a lot in the 80s and 90s when you think about it. You had that true checking line, a physical line that you would see it. Now in modern hockey, you don't see it as much because the lines are a lot more blended. You're right. It's kind of a throwback from the past. But they have that. Vegas has that with Pierre-Edouard Bellemare and Ryan Reeves and this guy Carrier or whoever else is with them. They're punishing, and they're doing a number on San Jose's top line of Pavelski or Joe Thornton or whatever the top 2 lines are. So you're seeing more of it come back, and I think it's because the movement's away from speed, and it's a little more to big wingers and big defensemen. I think you're going to see more of it. They got to be able to skate and score a little more than 20 years ago, but you're going to see more of it. So haven't seen it recently, have seen it in the past. Expected it in this series. In fact, you guys can't verify it, but I said to Patty, I said the problem's going to be got to get Crosby away from Cizikas.
Yeah.
Really couldn't do it all that much. They were trailing too much.
And really, Fletch, that's what you used to accuse me of in college. Start out fast, but I'm never able to finish.
Well, some other people said that about you too, but we won't talk about that.
All right, Fletch, tell me what you got for the prediction for this week.
My prediction is it's going to be a good week for the Pirates. I think we're going to continue to see some pitching, and I think that bullpen's going to try and figure things out. But, guys, you got to love what you're seeing with this starting crew, man. They are just pitching their asses off.
I agree.
I think this is the most incredible thing, to be at 9-6 at this point, and to have that kind of basically most of your key offense on the shelf. Dickerson.
Right.
I mean, this is a pop gun offense right now, but the starting pitching has been so good. I mean, the only criticism I might have of them is that as they keep shoving Kayla out there, it almost feels like Tony Watson as a closer a few years ago.
Wow, it's funny you should say that. I was thinking that the other night.
I mean, that's the only criticism I might have. But man, this has been a team is the polar opposite of the Penguins, giving everything they have, and if they can, I agree with you, Fletch. This has been amazing. If they can come out of May, in the middle of May, 4 or 5 games over 500, get a little dangerous towards the end of the year when everybody starts coming back.
Yep.
It's a very winnable division.
Oh, man.
Very winnable.
What do we have in combat sports, Mr. Gare?
Well, I mean, I think, this week coming up, one's on ESPN pay-per-view, but he's one of the best fighters in the sport. Terrence Bud Crawford. He's out of the Midwest. He's fighting Amir Khan. Khan as a pro is not quite what people expect him to be, but he's a very exciting fighter. He was an Olympian for the UK years ago. His pro career's got about 4 or 5 losses, but they've all been good losses. I don't think, again, this is going to be Hagler Hearns. Not sure it's worth pay-per-view or not because the undercard stinks. Boxing needs to follow MMA in that regard.
By the way, Gary, if I might just trip in here, Hagler Hearns, goosebump moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, for boxing.
Yeah,
right,
yep.
right.
I agree.
But I think Crawford is one of the best fighters in the sport. There are the typical boxing promotional problems because he's under Bob Arum and ESPN, and the best welterweights are promoted by Al Heyman and Premier Boxing Champions and either fight on Showtime or Fox. But I do think Crawford's going to need to make a statement here. Khan's the guy that's going to allow him to do it because both are pretty good active fighters. Danny Garcia is also fighting this weekend against a guy by the name of Adrian Granados, Dave.
Okay.
Danny Garcia is an unusual Philadelphia fighter. He's cerebral. He's not a brawler. He's very, very good. But Granados is a guy that makes good fights. So that one's actually on free television. I think it's on FS1. Garcia will win, but Granados can make it a very interesting fight. He's made an interesting fight against a lot of top guys. So my prediction is Crawford will win. The fight will have some pretty fun rounds in it with Khan. And Garcia will win. That might be a decision, but I think there'll be some rounds in that could be fun. The only other prediction I have, Dave, I have one more, and it's not boxing. Let me see here. I got to read this. Bear with me. I think Carolina's going to give Washington a little bit of trouble. I think the Caps are going to move on. So, I mean, I'm going to predict that. I think they may beat them a couple times because that fight in particular, I think, is really fired up Carolina. Yeah, their prize prospect getting knocked out by Ovechkin, but I do think that series will be fun. But I think the Caps are going to move on. So that would be my prediction for the next week that we're looking at.
Thoughts of Tracy Morgan's what is it, Dazen commercial?
Yeah. I need glasses. So
that's one of the great commercials of all. Did you see it, Fletch?
I did not.
Tracy Morgan, the new boxing website that you told me about.
DAZN. Yeah.
Oh, you got to see this. Tracy Morgan just has a laugh at the end that will make you laugh your ass off.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, so, you're right. Dave. He does.
That's pretty good. But,
what you got, Big Daddy?
Well, I'm going to bring it home. My boys, my Liverpool.
Oh, there's the shirt.
There's the shirt.
There he is. There he is.
I forgot what the shirt was.
Today, they beat Porto in the quarterfinal, won on an aggregate of 6-1. They go to the semifinals, where I'm going to use a swear word now. I hope you guys don't mind, but it's the only way you can describe Barcelona. Who or what? If for a team, Fletch. Let's use it again. Graphic again. Okay. Barcelona is the biggest bunch of bastards in professional sports worldwide. Defeated us last year in the Champions League final. Look at my finger coming at you. This is what you get on video and not in a podcast. My finger coming up at you. So they're going against them in the semifinals, and they're going to kick their ass. But even better off, the Manchester City, who's a point ahead of them in the Premier League. Well, they're actually 2 points down, but they have a game in hand. So basically, they're about a point up. So they're playing the Spurs this week. They're going to get their butts kicked. We're going to beat Cardiff. We're going to go into the league in the Premier League. So not only are we going to beat the hell out of Barcelona, but we're going to go back and take the first Premier League in 20 years. And you're going to be singing what, Fletcher?
You'll never walk alone, Dave. You, my friend, will never walk alone.
Oh, my God.
Put my finger at that.
Oh, put your finger up, Gary. Come on,
Dave, I'm telling you, man, you got me fired up for this. Like, I think I'm actually – they play at like 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. I just went to bed a couple hours earlier than that. But
you wake up at 6 in the morning then.
Yeah, I gotta start getting up. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Come get me. We'll go.
I've never done it. If they make the final, we're going to go to Peter's Pub. Or Piper's, not Peter's. Piper's. Gary, you come down. I did this last year when those bastards cheated and beat us. Oh. You're going to come down. We're going to watch Liverpool win the greatest championship in professional soccer the Champions League, and we're just going to have a good time. What did Fat Albert say?
Hey.
Did he say, no, going to have a good time? Then what? Fletcher? What did he say after that? Hey. Oh, my gosh. All right, gentlemen, I'm tired now.
I'm saying, you got me tired a little bit. Got me
My
nervous.
chest has been poked. I'm feeling a little sore right now. I don't know where that finger's been. I'm a little frightened.
Where is Piper's Pub in the Burg?
It is on the south side. It's an English pub, good food, good beer.
I bet that's a fun environment, seriously.
And they will have a lot of Liverpool fans there. And what are we going to sing, Fletcher?
You'll never walk alone, Dave.
You'll never walk alone.
Never walk alone.
Well, I'm making you sing too, Gary. When they win either of those titles, on here, you're both going to sing. Oh, my God. I'm pointing to both of you now.
I'm going to look it up. I'm going to rehearse.
Here's the Gary point.
I'm going to rehearse.
All right. Oh, well, gentlemen, until we meet again, have a good evening.
See you, fellas.
David.